What are you doing?
Oh, I'm reviewing this handheld and its new operating system for one of my videos.
Oh, wait, you're working?
Yeah, people need to know if this thing can run NES, SNES. It's running SteamOS now, so I have to measure the steam quality in the air and the humidity.
Dude, first of all, it's 10 a.m. on a Friday. No one works 10 a.m. on a Friday.
High school teachers.
Yeah, I hear they're very hardworking folk and terribly handsome.
But I gotta get this done. I need to get a video out for our YouTube channel.
Wait, you have a YouTube channel now?
What do you think we've been doing this whole time?
Just like hanging out, I'm learning how to cook?
No, this is being recorded for the channel.
You're recording me right now?
What do you think we've been doing all this time?
Just like hanging out like friends do? You have a channel, you've been recording me?
Yeah.
Where's the camera?
Right there.
What?
Right there.
This thing?
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a camera.
What did you imagine it was? It's a phone on a tripod.
That was like modern art. Sometimes they're like bananas and stuff.
Yeah, we're doing this for a YouTube channel.
No one's gonna want to watch an entire YouTube channel on this stuff.
People buy these handhelds so that they can relive memories of systems that they bought when they were children.
So middle-aged men desperately clinging to their childhood?
I mean, yeah.
Can relate to that, but dude, that's way too complicated. We both know the internet was made for only two purposes: Gmail and cat memes. No one's gonna want to spend money on this stuff, dude. You see what I mean? Pure amateur numbers. No, man, you're making this way too complicated.
Do you have a better idea?
Do I ever? Here, just don't go through my photos.
You have Retroarch on this?
See, your problem is you think too much. Nothing good comes from thinking. Let me explain. Why I need to grill and learn all the things about temperatures. Here you go.
Pretty good.
Right? Who needs all this mess when I can just push a button and call it quits?
What else do you do?
I have a huge issue with people trying to sell you things you don't need, like a future and degrees and whatnot. For example, why spend all that money and time in debt?
You are now a doctor.
I'm gonna surgery somebody later.
Maybe I should just do a video on emulating on your phone.
You know, you'd probably get actual viewership from that. Because let's face it, people watching this, they don't have any money. Anyways, glad you took my advice. Life can be so much simpler if you just stop thinking so much. I'll be ready in 2 minutes.
Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Mikhailov from Team Retro, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. So today, we're looking at emulation from a bit of a different perspective. Typically on this channel, I'll do a whole bunch of reviews of handhelds and things that you have to buy that are directly related to having a specific gaming console that plays retro games. But people don't always want to buy an extra device and don't always have the money for an extra device, but they may have the money to get an extra accessory or maybe just a little something to enhance gaming on a device they already own at home. In this video, we're going to cover emulation on something that you carry with you every single day: your phone. And we're going to cover iOS emulation, we're going to cover Android emulation, and we're going to take a look at a couple of accessories that you can buy for your iOS or Android phone or tablet. So let's dive in and get to work. Let's get started with the most common device that is in a lot of people's pockets: the iPhone. Now, things are much different in 2025 when it comes to the iPhone. Back in 2009, iPhone was the primary phone people carried in the US, even though this phone couldn't really do much of anything. Today, there are less iPhones out there in favor of cheaper Android phones, but iOS is actually capable of emulation with a couple of different workable options that were previously unavailable to iOS users until last year. You used to have to jailbreak your phone in order to use these emulators, but now they are readily available to all iOS users. The most common emulator on the iPhone right now is the Delta emulator. This is a very simple emulator that is available on the App Store or through sideloading through applications such as AltStore or Sideloadly. There are two features of this emulator that stand out for people just looking to get started with iOS emulation. The first is the presentation. There are a good amount of touchscreen skins that allow portrait screen emulation and control, making this emulator simulate an old Game Boy, but it's on your phone. However, if you prefer a landscape orientation, you can have this too. One of the downsides of Delta is its lack of compatibility, only sticking to Nintendo's line of early consoles and handhelds up to Nintendo 64 as well as Sega Genesis. However, Retroarch is also available. Retroarch is a little harder to set up because it has a massive suite of features, but you can have many more emulation cores going back as far as Atari. You also gain arcade emulation through Retroarch and access to Sega and SNK consoles. There's a bit of a learning curve, but there are plenty of guides out there to help you get started. This is also the primary emulation app for the majority of the retro handhelds out there. If you decide you like retro console emulation and are interested in picking one of those cheaper handhelds up, then I advise taking some time to learn Retroarch on your phone first, so that way you can just dive in when you pick up one of these other retro handhelds. Both Delta and Retroarch use touchscreen controls, which are a great option for RPGs and maybe some puzzle games that don't require a ton of input. But for platforming and some more precision games, you'll want to invest in some kind of external controller. So let me showcase some of these options, starting with something relatively new. This is a $25 controller case made by Gamebaby that was sent to me for review. They originally sent me the first early engineering sample of their case and have since sent me a version 2 that has some updated looks and button functionality. At the end of the day, what this ultimately is an iPhone case that allows you to detach the bottom of the case and reattach it to the front of your phone. Then, combined with a custom Delta emulator skin, this controller will use capacitive touchpads to simulate tapping the screen. This case is nice and cheap, but unfortunately you kind of get what you pay for. The case's buttons do not always respond if you have a screen protector on. The case itself doesn't really serve to protect the phone from drops, and the fit is very tight. In fact, every time I've tried to separate the bottom, I felt concerned that I was going to snap the connectors. Another negative about having a case like this is you also lose MagSafe functions when using this case just because of where the buttons are. There's no way to connect anything wireless or MagSafe when you are using this case because the buttons are in the way. However, if you're the type of person to go caseless and you're interested in having just simple on-the-go controls for portrait mode on your phone, I'll leave a link in the description because you can either have a minimalist case or you could just keep the bottom and you could slide it into the front when you're interested in using it. Which, yeah, I know that kind of defeats the purpose of it being a case. If you don't like cases and you want to keep this separate, you could just keep it kind of on you or in a bag or something like that. And even though I can't necessarily recommend this case specifically, I'm excited for the future development of cases like this. This one is just not quite there yet. I prefer a rugged case like this one from UAG that has been on my iPhone 15 Pro Max since the day I got it. And I'd like to supplement that with a well-made, case-compatible telescopic. There is one that I've settled on that has proven to be exceptional, and that is the GameSir G8 Plus. This is a Bluetooth controller that has never failed me. It has some of the best ergonomics of all the telescopic controllers out there, and because it's Bluetooth, it's compatible with pretty much anything. It even stretches out far enough to fit tablets like the iPad mini. If you require a USB-C connection, you can also pick up this telescopic controller called the Abxylute S9. This will also extend to fit an iPad mini tablet, but this has a USB-C wired connection. If you're worried about latency, this controller might be a better fit, but it is a little pricier. You might also decide you just like the feel of an Xbox or a PlayStation controller. In that case, this phone mount from Mechanism might fit you a little bit better. You could attach a clip to the back of your controller, and the phone mount then attaches to the clip. Then you can use the MagSafe connection of your phone to attach it to the mount. This solution is for people who prefer the comfort of a standard controller but still want to game on their phone. Adding a controller to your iPhone or iPad also opens up other possibilities, such as Xbox cloud gaming with Game Pass, local PC streaming through an app called Moonlight, Razer PC Remote Play, or PS5 Remote Play using the PX Play app. If you have Apple Arcade, there are a couple of really nice exclusives that have controller support, such as Sonic Dream Team. iPhones and iPads have also had controller support for Genshin Impact for a long time. There really is a lot you could do with an iOS device in 2025 versus in 2009 when I bought my first ever iPhone. While retro gaming is now possible on iOS devices, the compatibility is limited compared to Android devices. If you own an Android phone with a decent processor, there's a whole world of emulation open to you that is just not possible on Apple devices. You can also get a powerful Android phone for much cheaper than an iOS device. For example, this phone is the Redmagic 10 Air sent to me by Rob, the Retro Tech Dad. This phone starts at $549 and comes equipped with a powerful Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 processor. This phone is advertised as a gaming phone with a 120Hz display and some really cool features focused strictly on gaming. With a powerhouse like this phone, you can emulate higher-end systems like PlayStation 2. The Redmagic 10 Air can also emulate up to Nintendo Switch, utilizing that high-end Snapdragon processor. These are things that are just not possible on an iPhone or iPad. And if you're interested in this phone, and if you're interested in this device, I'll leave a link to Retro Tech Dad's review in the description. When it comes to Android devices, there's also a series of Android phones called foldables, like this one, the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 5. This phone has two modes, a closed mode and an open tablet mode. The tablet mode allows us some awesome flexibility to be able to fit two screens, making a foldable phone a great option for Nintendo DS and 3DS emulation. For Nintendo DS, I've been trying out the Melon DS emulator because it's more readily available than the depreciated Drastic emulator that shut down sometime last year. There's also a 3DS emulator called Azahar that is starting to show some promise and is the most easily accessible emulator today. Depending on the strength of your phone, you could also increase the rendering resolution. For example, this 3DS game is set to a 3x resolution, which is a 1200 by 720 resolution. This sharpens up the graphics to look much nicer than on an original 3DS. Because the Galaxy Z Fold 5 has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, the same powerhouse that powers the AYN Odin 2, Odin 2 Mini, and Odin 2 Portal, we can increase the resolution and still maintain a steady 60 frames per second. Snapdragon phones can also use custom turnip drivers that are specifically tuned for these processors to improve performance and compatibility with Nintendo Switch as well as PC games through Winlater. If you have a folding phone, I highly recommend the GameSir X5 Lite because the USB-C connection is on the left side of the controller instead of the right side. This is vital for foldable phones because the controller will rest at the bottom of the phone instead of the top. It makes much more sense given the position of the USB-C ports on these foldable phones. This is also a pretty inexpensive and really comfortable controller. In addition to using it for 3DS emulation on the Fold 5, I've also been using it for local PC streaming on the Redmagic. It's just a very solid telescopic controller. You can also use it with a case on due to the flexible USB-C connection, meaning you won't have to compromise the phone's safety in order to game. If you have an 8-inch Android tablet, you can use a Bluetooth controller like the GameSir G8 Plus to play in portrait mode and display both screens that way. One of my favorite Android tablets is the Lenovo Y700 2023 model because it has a second USB-C port on the device. So with this particular tablet, you can even use a USB-C controller in portrait mode. Most tablets will only have one port on the bottom, so you will need to use a Bluetooth controller to play in portrait mode. This portrait orientation is also a really good fit for Tate mode arcade games. However, if you're using a phone with the mechanism setup, you could simply mount the phone in portrait mode and you're good to go. With that, let's wrap things up with my final thoughts on retro gaming on iOS as well as retro gaming on Android, with the understanding that you're probably going to use or upgrade your daily driver phone based on your individual needs. On iOS, you have access to an easy-to-use emulator in Delta and full access to Retroarch if you prefer to use that. Apple devices have more case support, which means that you could find unique controller cases like the Gamebaby phone case and feel a little more comfortable using something like Delta with the touchscreen. However, there are also plenty of telescopic controllers available as well. There are games that are locked to Apple Arcade that you just won't be able to play like any other device. Sonic Dream Team comes to mind as one because it's actually a very good game with controller support, but only Apple users can play it. The negatives of iOS gaming and emulating come from the limitations of the emulators. Emulation wasn't allowed on iPhones and iPads for the longest time, and Apple devices aren't compatible with the Just-in-Time Compilation Protocol, or JIT, which many high-end emulators on the Android side utilize in their programming. I would not expect something like PS2 or Switch emulation to hit iPhones for quite some time, if ever. There is also the consideration that iPhones and iPads are just darn expensive. Most iPhone owners are on a payment plan with their cell provider just to even own one. So if you're more budget-oriented or like owning your devices outright, you might already be in Android's ecosystem instead. Which, if you are, not only do you probably have a cheaper phone, you have a lot more emulation potential because you have access to many more emulators that do utilize that JIT protocol. If you have a phone with a Snapdragon processor, you also have access to custom drivers, which can be the difference between a game not running or running flawlessly. If you are interested in Android gaming, the Play Pass subscription is only $5 as opposed to $10 a month for Apple Arcade, but you are losing out on some exclusives. And finally, while you do have more emulator options on Android, things can also get more technical. You need to know how to sideload many of the emulators out there, and more tinkering, research, and knowledge is generally required when setting up emulation on Android. It's not as plug and play as the Delta emulator on iOS. So if you're generally not tech savvy and aren't interested in anything past Nintendo 64, you might not find an Android phone a good fit for emulation. However, whether you're an iPhone user or an Android user, it's still amazing to me that in 2025, we could play all of these timeless games from our childhood on a device we carry in our pockets and purses every day. So maybe you don't need to shell out for a retro handheld. Maybe the best gaming device really is the one that's on you at all times. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And please feel free to continue the conversation on the Retro Handhelds Discord, where you could find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to support the channel like these wonderful people on the screen, you can do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all those places are in the description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you in any way. Every smash of that button helps the channel grow, and allows me to get more content out to you. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.